36 years of teaching.
Yep.
A wealth of knowledge. There's a lot of people who are doing amazing things. A lot of students you have touched who learned from you, who are in powerful rooms, who are doing amazing things, and they always give you homage and talk about how bright of a mind you are. We are in a crisis, teacher crisis. There's not a lot of teachers. People are being discouraged. People don't understand the importance of this field and the work they do.
All true.
And I'm seeing so many teachers do Teach for America, teach for 1 year, then get a book deal and write about what's going on in the system.
Right.
36 years, all the people you have touched, your mind. When are you writing your book? Like, this got to happen.
What's that phrase? It just so happens. Something like that. But I knew that, I knew I had to wait until I had enough gravel under my tires to really, I started thinking about it, but there was, and this is going to seem a little crazy, but I mean, for me, the whole thing boils down to just kind of like a specific moment that I thought like, man, I gotta write this shit down. So teaching at FDA, and the student that I'm talking about is now teaching at City College, right? She went to Georgetown. So I'm doing group work in my first period. This is first period, by the way, first period class, doing group work and trying to like get them not to sit with their friends and everything. So this one young lady, she's not having it. She doesn't want to play in any reindeer games, nothing. So she's very polite, very intelligent, but dude, totally stubborn. And I can't move the needle. And this is like 8:06. I spent the last hour and a half getting ready for this stuff. I'm like, I got that teacher, like, this is me, baby. And this one kid, and I can't stop focusing on her. So she refuses to sit with this group, that group. And then she just says, well, I'm going home. And she walks out. And I think like, well, okay, problem solved. And then, but the long story short is that eventually she comes back because they won't let her go home because this is FDA. She's outside my class, just pacing back and forth. And I'm having to deal with it. And you've been in the student position, but like all the students are looking at me and they're looking at her, they're looking at me and they want to know, like, what are you going to do? So I get out, I'm like, listen, let's go. You got to get inside. And then she goes, no, thank you. And I'm like, what? And she goes, no, thank you. I said, no, you've got it. She said, no, thank you. And now I'm thinking like, this is like a level of like passive aggressive. I mean, I didn't even know what to do. So back and forth, father, she grabbed her stuff, went on. But eventually by the end of that day, she came back after school, served her time. And I'm not saying cause and effect, but like, I have her next year for AP. Year after that, she's taken a couple of other classes. We got really close. Senior year working on it. And then she goes to Georgetown, right? And then she's an author and then she's teaching. But like part of it, I guess I probably told the story poorly, but part of it was I thought that there were things that could be recorded. Now, the other part of it is that white savior stuff that comes up. Because I'm assuming if someone's looking at us right now, this is not like me parachuting into your world and saving you. I just happen to be a person working there, but yet at the same point, there's some optics with it, right? Like white teacher in Harlem, however you want to phrase it. So I guess part of what I've written down too is trying to come to terms with the phrase that I keep using over and over again was I was a part of something, but I was apart from something. And if you're going to be that person, like TFA, we used to call that teach for a while. Where they would come in, put their 1 or 2 years in, then become like an advocate or go to law school. But they would always kind of like always talk about their time uptown or their time in the Bronx or their time in Harlem, which I find is just disingenuous because for me, I always looked at teaching as like what my old man did. You ride until not till you die, but you ride until, you're in it. And this is what you do. This is who you are. It's not like some passing thing to kind of assuage any type of guilt that you might have. And then you can like dine out on those stories of Raheem for like whatever, but you only spent 2 or 3 years in that. And you know that a lot of city schools, there's big turnover that occurs because of it. So I guess back to your original point. Yeah, I did. I'm pretty much finished with it right now.
That's awesome, man. And we got to get that to the right people, man.
Well, I mean, obviously, you're like a Olympic diver. You got a platform, so make a splash. I'm not proud.
That's all I need to hear.
I'm not proud. Definitely.
If you had something you could tell a first year teacher,
yeah,
what would you tell them?
I was just writing this stuff down. First of all, you got to know your shit, and you have to be enthusiastic about it. Like when I started at FDA, I had to take education classes to get certified. My father always joked, certified is not qualified, but like it's all that stuff. But I like if I could dream that dream, if you have a history teacher, you got to have a history major teaching that class. Math, same thing. So you got to know your stuff. You really have to be passionate about it. You've got to make sure that if you set up a ton of rules, kid's going to tune out like that. If you got 3 or 4 things that you believe in and then you enforce at the risk of making a kid quote unquote feel bad, because there has to be, if you set up a series of rules and you start, and I've seen it all the time with young teachers, they start breaking the rules or they do the from now on conversation. Because as soon as you say from now on to a kid, the kid's like, what about all that shit you were telling us before? Well, from now on, we're gonna, you know what I mean? So first year teacher, I think you got to be excited about the material. You got to understand who you work for, and you work for those kids in the desks in front of you. That's number one. If you think you work for the DOE, you work for your principal, you're mistaken. And don't get me started on administrators. But the other thing is that the key people in your life, the number one are the kids in front of you. Stay after school, like go the extra mile, and don't do that thing where you think you're an advocate because you are quote unquote relating to a kid. Like advocacy is busting somebody's ass and getting them better at a skill set of writing, reading, public speaking, so they have those tools. Because my thing, like here, back to my construction, I was really good at knocking shit down, putting it up nice and square. Now you asked me to put like a cabinet in it. That's not me. Light fixtures, anything. What I could do is I could demolish, I could set up square walls. So I always looked upon myself as a teacher. I could hand a kid off to a college and the walls are going to be square. Now the professors are the ones that put in all the cabinetry and all that fine stuff. But like that type of thing. So you have to be willing. You have to understand that teaching is a blue collar job. It ain't a white collar job, right? You want to make sure that you have kids do enough heavy lifting that they got fucking calluses on their hands. So when they go to college, they're not going to be overwhelmed. Because if it's just about, you relating to your students, I mean, that can happen. Eventually I get a rapport with my students, but there's on a daily basis, you have to have expectations. You got to be prepped. And you can't just I've worked with teachers that were proud that they were doing the same shit on this day that they were last year. Like they're like, I'm on schedule right now. And, the kids be damned. And then it's that classic teacher thing. This is the worst thing. I think I'm rambling a little bit.
No, you're good.
But like teachers, the first thing a shitty teacher does is they blame students because they're easy. Because adolescents they're out of their minds. They're going to do stuff that's going to annoy you. They're not going to do work. So you could do that thing like, well, I gave you this opportunity. You didn't do it. And here's your grade. Well, are you willing to stay after school and tell a kid, look, you didn't do your homework. You can come after school and do it. I'll accept it. I'll give you a little deduction, but you can still put your time in. And if you're not willing to put your time in after school, and this really is what FDA kind of helped me because everybody was doing that.
Yeah.
Like you got to go that extra mile, and you can't just, blaming kids it's fucking easy because they're always going to do something aberrant. But at the same time, can you get past that? And then the other thing is, are you willing to make them really, really reach for stuff, knowing that they may not get it, but knowing that they're going to be better, than they were if you just simply gave them like handouts and stuff like that?
Speaking of going extra mile, and I'm probably rambling going back. I remember being in your class, you used to have people come through. I remember, say John went to West Point. You had connections at West Point. Talk a little bit about that, and
all right, talk
a little bit also about, like the idea of going extra mile, ways that teachers can do that.
Right.
And also about what you're doing now. I know you're retired.
Yep.
Quote unquote retired. You always at FDA. I text you.
Yeah. I like to think of myself as Ron Artest. I'm coming off the bench, but I ain't starting.
Got you. Got you.
So I was fortunate to have, I'm from a large family, and I have older sister, a younger and older sister who live in Connecticut, and they had a friend of theirs. But essentially, how can I tell this story? My first year at FDA, I took my homeroom out to my sister's place in Connecticut. Pool party, did that with AP2. So there's this kid in my class. I'll call him O. We talk all the time. And this is back in the day too. He's probably in his mid-30s right now. So when you get out to New Canaan, coming from 125th Street, Metro North, go out to New Canaan, these are like circular driveway suburbia, like investment banker suburbia. So I happen to be in the car with Omar. We're getting driven from the station to my sister's house, and he's looking around, and he goes, like, how do you get a house like this? I said, well, talk to my sister and talk to her husband. Now, they both came from middle-class families. They went to Wharton B School. Ooh. Investment bankers. And so their education was the trampoline that got them to this specific point, right? So Omar started talking to them, and he found out like there's something called investment banking. Now, I'm not making this shit up. We get there, right? So it's my class. They're coming in, pounding in there. My sister has 5 boys, oldest of whom recognizes Omar. Omar recognizes him because they played hockey against one another, at 145th Street in Harlem. So there's that. Now, stay with this. So Omar finds out he's a sophomore at this point. He's kind of turning around. I can see him. Junior year, much more serious. Senior year, working college stuff. And he goes to Carnegie Mellon, right? So he goes to Carnegie Mellon, comes out of college, and what is he? He becomes an investment banker. Now, he's doing investment banking. Way back in the day, he found out about it. He calls my sister, and a resume comes across his desk. The resume is my nephew that he played hockey against. 6 years later, resume comes across his desk. He calls my sister, this your son? And she goes, yeah. She goes, keep an eye out for him. Now, I'm just saying that. So later on, what happens is my sister would come driving from Connecticut, and I made an agreement with my AP students that I would work on your college process with you until you hit send. So from sophomore, junior, senior year, common application, all that stuff. Now, she came in, took kids on trips, fed them, had connections to big time universities, got people in front of big donors, the West Point, her husband went to West Point, all that stuff. But I was just in a situation where I had people that had this skill set. I just happened to be related to them. And then all of a sudden, this became like the next thing. So when I would recruit for AP, I always told my AP students, I remember I gave you the same speech. First year, I said, listen, this is going to be unpleasant for you, but at some point we're going to be done. We're going to be having juice and cookies. We're going to watch movies. Yeah. Which we did. Yeah. And then we're going to start thinking about, because again, if I just think about you as a high school student, it's not good enough. So now you got to think about, and this is my former student. I mentioned Felix, who went to Columbia. He told me that at some point in his career, he stopped looking at himself as a student. He started looking at himself as a candidate. And that became my mindset. Like I had to look at you as a college candidate and not just a student. And again, what an advanced placement program will do is a kid will have 3 or 4 or 5 APs on their transcript. And now they're in a competitive atmosphere with students that come from much more advantaged backgrounds. So that's, this was all family stuff, contributing money. They bought books for me because these people have done well, and I just happened to be in a situation where I was thankful that, I had students that there was a need that was there, and I had people that could jump in, and they did.
Yeah, I remember again, difficult 10th grade, and your sister came and did a whole speech for us, and it was like, I thought you was doing reverse psychology. It was like, everybody was motivated again, like, what, this could be our life? No. This is what we can accomplish. So everybody was like, you're going home and... Right.
And I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying it's just me, but I know, correct if I'm wrong, but I know when you got to college, you felt you like had a skill set that would allow you to perform. And that was the climate that existed at FDA. Yeah. It was a college prep school for real.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times people were like, oh my God, how did you do so well in college? And you look at the zip code and you look at the schools you went to. And I always tell people, like, I was prepared for college. I was super fortunate, regardless of the neighborhoods that the schools was located in, Harlem, South Bronx. Yeah, life wasn't easy when I went home. But when I got to FDA, I had a quality education. And I had a lot of teachers, a lot of support of people who pushed us, who made it uncomfortable. You weren't easy on us. But when I got to Africana Studies, I was like, oh, thank God, because now I got a kid. Now life is really, I'm being an adult. I got jobs, and I was able to manage so much of that because I just knew how to study. Something as simple as studying. Yo. I knew how to take notes. I knew how to, like when you taught us the Cornell notes, like what to pay attention to, stop wasting your time, how to use my time wisely, which is all these skills you need to be successful in college. Right. So.
Because if you don't have calluses, your hands are going to hurt and you can't lift. Yeah. It's like coming into 2-a-days and you're out of shape. It's going to be tough for you.